Hello and welcome back to Polar Night. We will be continuing where we left off, which, if you recall, is after the whole explosion with the Sylvia. So after Garret woke up and decided that, you know what, I'm not going to be able to sleep, I just want to go for a walk, he decided to go outside and he started to notice that there was fire coming from one of the portholes, and the ship ended up exploding. Thankfully, and by some weird miracle, and maybe by some weird voices leading him towards safety, he ended up finding the Aran, which is the ship that these guys were looking for to begin with. And everyone is suspicious about that. And by everyone, I mean the people that managed to survive the explosion of the Sylvia. So basically, and obviously, only the main cast were the ones that survived. We don't see the captain or anyone else that belonged to the crew of the Sylvia. We don't know if they are gone, but most likely. They do refer to the ship as having sunk, so, you know, what can you do? So everyone is acting obviously a little suspicious. And Garret, while he was rummaging around the ship before everyone else arrived, trying to find, warm clothing, ended up finding a note showing that perhaps the crew of the Aran were kind of going a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And I mean, if you get stuck in the middle of the ice, you're running out of provisions, and your crews and your passengers are starting to act a little weird, then, of course it's gonna heighten tensions, anxiety, paranoia, etc., the works. But we haven't actually seen any signs of people, though. You would expect to find bodies, but there is nobody there. There is nothing there. It's almost as if everyone just disappeared in the blink of an eye. A case in point by the fact that when Garret goes to the engine room to investigate instead of the mess hall, which you do end up seeing in the other video, he finds it looks like somebody was trying to fix either an engine or a generator, but they were literally in the middle of fixing it, and then they disappeared, they left. So there's some suspicious things happening with the Aran, including, of course, the door. The door marked with Norwegian words, and how do I know it's Norwegian? Because eventually they do say that. I already know what it says, even though I'm gonna end up asking what it says at the end of this video, since I'm recording this after the fact. But yeah, so a lot of weird things going on. So it's looking like we're getting the spooks now. Anyways, so yeah, let's continue this update and see what more spooky and crazy stuff these guys find. I decided confronting them now was a bad idea. I'd rather wait till I could speak to one of them alone. With nothing left for me here, I decided to take a look around the ship. Where should I go? Actually, it doesn't matter where. You'll end up at all places. As I approached the door to the bridge, I could hear murmuring. The door had a small window that had been shattered, leaving broken glass scattered all over the floor. As my boots crunched the glass, the murmuring stopped. I pushed the door open and saw two pairs of accusing eyes glaring back at me. Oh, perfect. Aaron and Tabby. Exactly who I wanted to see right now. The bridge itself looked wrecked. Everything was damaged, as far as I could tell, but not from neglect or the elements. It looked like a fight had taken place. Each station had banks of instruments and computer screens, all now blank and silent. Layers of frost and ice had covered them, burying much of the devices. Another loud groan of metal. Up here, the metallic creaking felt louder than ever. I felt the vibrations in my very bones. It's no use. Everything is smashed. I bristled at his accusatory tone, but said nothing. I really did not want to start a fight. Swallowing my pride, I made my way over to them, pausing as my boots once again crunched broken glass from the nearby consoles. They really did a number on this place. I don't think that there's a single station that isn't totaled. So I see. There was an awkward silence. The pair of them shuffled uncomfortably. Tabby in particular seemed like she was going to speak a couple of times before seemingly having second thoughts. Fuck this. I was just going to get this over with. Look, if you have anything you want to say to me, now's the fucking time. You want to blame me for voting to continue, eh? Aaron, for his part, looked even more uncomfortable and said nothing. Tabby, on the other hand... Is all of this worth it? Does seeing all of this... She stretched her arms out, gesturing at the tomb-like command center. Another eerie groan from the ship punctuated her point. Help you sleep? 'Cause I could have happily gone the rest of my life not seeing this place. That isn't fair. Do you think that I wanted this to happen? Who cares what you wanted? You saw the Sylvia. Hell, you probably had a better idea about what a fucking ship heap it was than any of us. Stefan, I can understand. He's fucking obsessed. But you hate your brother. I don't see... Don't. My tail curled and lips trembled as I struggled to contain a growl. Aaron noticed and took a small step back. Tabby stood her ground, but she lapsed into silence, staring me down. After a pause, she turned and stomped off towards the bridge wing. I took a second to settle myself. My blood raced and my limbs trembled. In, count to 3. Hold, count to 4. Out. So, we came up here to see if the radio worked. I blinked, suddenly remembering that he was here. He still looked uneasy, watching me while his leg twitched. With a deep breath, I relaxed, rubbing my eyes. Yeah, that sounded like a good idea. Bad news is, it's wrecked. Of course it was. Wrecked? Someone smashed the shit out of it. It wasn't an accident. That much I can tell you. Are you sure? Take a look for yourself. He led me towards a side room whose door had been smashed in. Its handle and lock were missing, leaving a ragged hole. The room itself was pretty cramped and, much like everywhere else, covered in a layer of frost. Snow had built up in piles in the corners of the room. Much of the room was taken up by banks of equipment. It looked pretty modern. At least it would have if not for the massive chunks taken out of it. It was hard to see through the layer of snow, but I could make out pieces of the equipment on the floor. I gave a low whistle. See what I mean? It almost looks like someone went to it with an axe or something. Yeah, but why? We both stood and stared at it in silence for a while, pondering the ramifications. Actually, I just remembered. You're an electrical engineer, yeah? Think you could fix it? Electrician. I mostly deal with wiring, fuses. I passed my torch beam over the wreckage. I don't know, man. I could take a look, but I'm no miracle worker. But there's a chance? I thought hard, pondering. I didn't know anything about radios. If there was a manual or someone here knew more about them. I guess. Maybe Joseph would know about radios. I could ask him. Rufus is an ex-army. He might... I gave him a look. Okay, yeah. Maybe not Rufus. If I needed help fixing a machine gun, maybe. But this strikes me as a little out of his wheelhouse. In any case, it's something to keep in mind. Besides, it needs powering. Batteries? Well, that or mains. But I doubt the generator is in much better condition. Again, Joseph might know more. I think after the Sylvia, no one is going to be reassured with him having a hand in fixing anything. Can't argue with that. Tabby, however... He gave me a quizzical look, then a look of dawning realization. Oh, of course! She's a mechanic. Can't hurt to ask. Although, given our argument earlier, there was a non-zero chance that it absolutely could hurt. Tabby was staring out of the bridge wing window. From here, I could make out the deck of the Aran, coated in snow. It was the first time that I could see the Aran from this angle. If I hadn't already seen her state from the inside, she'd almost look functional. Tabby didn't react to our approach, coldly staring off into the distance. Tabby? She didn't move, but she did grunt in acknowledgement. We were thinking if Garret could fix the radio, and if you could fix the generator, we might get a message off. She was quiet for a moment before turning to look at me with a strangely quizzical expression. Do you really think that we could fix it? I can't promise, but I suppose that I can try. But without power, it's a moot point anyway. I've thought about it, but a generator for a ship this size is probably more electrical than mechanical. Besides, it's more complex than anything that I've worked on before. I fix cars, not giant ship engines. Her tone sounded a bit defensive, like she was looking for excuses. I understand that, but do you think that you could give it a try? If it's a no-go, then we can think of something else. But if we could get main power, it would make a lot of stuff easier, right? I mean, at least we might get lights on, right? I nearly strained something resisting the urge to strangle him. I honestly couldn't tell which of the pair had less tact. At least Tabby was deliberately an arsehole. The scowl she gave him seemed to clue him in. What I mean to say... Shut it. I'm scared of the dark, so naturally, I'd be all in on going to the deepest, darkest part of the ship, crawling under the machines there, and fucking around with nothing but a flashlight. Isn't that what you're asking? We both exchanged looks. Maybe to either of us, with the right knowledge, it would have been daunting, but for someone petrified of the dark, it was a nightmare scenario. I'd been down there after all. The pitch black was enough to give me a panic attack. I'm not asking you to do anything that you don't want. I'm just asking if you'd be willing to try, that's all. I don't see a difference, Garret. She looked away, hugging herself, scraping the floor with a hoof absently and biting her lip. I saw Aaron shift beside me and I gave him my best shut up. Look. I'll think about it, okay? No promises. I nodded, pleased to have at least gotten that much. With nothing left to do here, I gave both of them a curt nod and turned to the stairs leading back down. Where do I go? The crew cabins were spread across 2 decks. Some looked normal, almost untouched by time. Others were trashed, the doors smashed in or hanging off the hinges while the contents of the rooms were in disarray. My stomach clenched as I realized Connor's cabin was somewhere here, the place that he'd spent his final days. There were no names on any of the cabins, only numbers. I didn't even know where to start as I moved between the rows of doors, peeking into the open ones and being immediately put off by the mess within. It had been 9 years since I'd seen him. He had been 29. If I even found his body, would I recognize it? Even after 2 years. I felt nauseous just thinking about it. I saw what looked like dark stains on some of the walls. Maybe old blood stains? It was hard to say. My nose couldn't detect anything, but then after this long, dried blood would be undetectable by scent. I was shaken from my thoughts by the sound of something moving. My heart leaped into my throat and I froze. Swallowing, I crept closer, realizing that it was someone rifling through drawers. The sound of cupboards being opened and ransacked. I heard what sounded like an loud exhale. I carefully approached the door, prepping to look around. Gah! Ah! I reeled, rubbing my nose as he stumbled back before collapsing onto his backside on the floor. The fuck? Garret? Sorry. I pinched my nose, dabbing at my nostrils for signs of blood, and gave him a targeting smile as he gazed up at me. First with a furious look, but then he softened when he saw that it was me. Okay, I'm convinced that you're trying to scare me deliberately. I offered a hand and pulled him upright. Sorry. Didn't mean it. I spoke thickly, pinching my nose. It didn't seem to be bleeding, fortunately. You should maybe consider that bell idea. Fuck you. He gave a little smirk, but then his face fell. So about Alex, any luck? No, not He trailed off. I swallowed. Should I put my hand on his shoulder? Should I tell him to keep looking? Was he starting to understand that Alex was almost certainly... Take it you're looking for your brother? Carl, right? Connor. And I suppose I was. I couldn't meet his gaze, but it seemed I really was as easy to read as people had said. I've searched the 3 cabins on this side. He pointed back the way that I'd come, indicating the open doors on the left wall. And I didn't see anything belonging to a Connor, but you're welcome to give them a look. Thanks. He unexpectedly placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed, giving me a sympathetic smile. For a brief moment, my chest felt warm and I considered asking him to help me look, just to avoid the loneliness. Just so that I didn't have to find Connor alone. But in a moment, he was gone. I glanced back to the rooms Stefan had already ransacked. There was a bitter taste in my mouth. My heart was racing. I wandered down towards the first cabins. The cabin opposite the one that Stefan had already rummaged through seemed a better condition. With a deep breath, to calm my nerves, I stepped inside. The place was surprisingly tidy and clean. Whatever ride had taken place hadn't touched this cabin, nor, it seemed, had Stefan yet. I didn't even know where to begin, nor even what I was looking for, really. I was less concerned about finding Connor's body given no one else seemed to be around. Connor wasn't the type to keep a diary, at least not as long as I'd known him. In fact, he was the type to find it stupid and a waste of time. So I started looking for any clothing that I could find, any books, files, or papers, anything that I thought might have a name on it. The first cabin was devoid of anything useful. Room by room, I advanced along the row, sticking to the side Stefan had yet to ransack. The 5th cabin along was where I found it. It was crumpled up and thrown under the desk. It was pretty fragile from all the frost and moisture, but it was amazingly still legible. C. The glitch in the GPS was unacceptable. You forced my hand in taking the beacons offline. I don't know if you've been speaking to Hagen behind my back, but any further glitches, and I know who to look for. You're in this as much as we are. Destroy this note. I'm keeping an eye on you. I took a moment for me to absorb what I was reading, but then it struck me, like a brick in the face. See? Connor? Was this a threat? Blackmail? Connor was a mechanic. Would he be involved with the GPS? Questions whirled in my mind to the point that I didn't hear a voice pipe up from the door until that it was right behind me. Garret? I jumped, clutching my chest. Stefan was watching me with a concerned look. You okay? You seem to be really focused on something. Yeah. Without thinking, I slipped the note into my pocket as subtly as I could. I thought I saw Connor's name on something, but it turned out to be nothing. Stefan gave me an odd look, his eyes glancing past me at the desk. It was completely bare. Right. What about you? Any, I wanted to get off the topic quickly, but I nearly blurted out any luck, as though discovering his brother's corpse was a jackpot or something. Gesturing pathetically, imploring him to understand my meaning. No. A lot of cabins are trashed already. I thought the same as you, maybe finding something with his name, but nothing. So what do you think happened? Huh? To the Aran? Yeah, but also about this whole thing. The expedition? You don't think that it's convenient that we ran straight into the Aran within days of starting on this expedition? I'm telling you, Sharif knows more than he's letting on. Are you also accusing him of setting fire to the Sylvia? An odd look passed over his face. I couldn't quite catch it, but I could swear that his eyes darted to the door. What do you think happened to the Sylvia? I don't know. I was on deck when it went up, and the fire started beneath me, near the front and the, starboard? I mean the right side of the ship, below decks. That's pretty specific. It's hard to mistake the source of the fire when the explosion was right underneath me. Now that I think about it, wasn't the laundry room about there? Maybe someone left a load of laundry in the tumble dryer. Yeah. He was silent for a moment. "Listen, I'm gonna keep searching." "Yeah, good luck. I think I'm gonna look elsewhere." "You're giving up?" I doubt that I'll find his body here, and I'm kind of getting creeped out by rooting through other people's stuff like this." His expression flickered. Without a word, he turned and marched off to continue his search. Once he was gone, I felt a note in my pocket. Could Connor be involved with whatever had happened here? I decided to keep this to myself for now, at least until I knew more. The laboratories were nestled between a bunch of machinery and storerooms. Inside, Rufus was surveying the room. It was difficult to figure out his expression, but he seemed lost in thought. On the other side of the room, Sharif was peering at a stone object sitting on the counter, a look of intense consternation on his face. The rest of the laboratory seemed reasonably intact except for some paraphernalia scattered on the floor. Rufus?" I approached him, drawing his gaze for a moment. He acknowledged me with a nod. "Damn this thing," he muttered, scanning the room. It was then that I noticed the stone object Sharif was studying wasn't the only one. All over the room, boxes stood, some empty, some half filled with packing material, but some had what looked like stone-carved things. Some lay on the counters, a bizarre array of shapes and sizes, some the size of pebbles, others large enough that it would require a couple of people to lift. They were clearly not natural, though they seemingly all had a unique shape. They were clearly handmade. "Gives me the creeps." He growled under his breath. I had to admit that it was unsettling to me too. "Any idea what these are?" "Not a one, although Sharif seems to be into them." He jerked his head in this direction. It was odd seeing him like this. Even in the current situation, he struck me as someone who didn't scare easily. He was clearly keeping his distance, watching the carvings carefully. You okay?" He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed to one of the carvings nearby, a large one covered in faded symbols. "Rufus?" "Oh, I'm fine." He never took his eyes off of the sculpture, and he didn't add anything more. We stood in silence for a while. I could feel the discomfort radiating off of him, like he wanted to run or smash something, but he was resisting the urge. I won't lie. His clear discomfort was worsening my own. The stone objects were unsettling to look at. I slowly made my way around the lab benches towards Sharif. He was still peering closely at one of the stone objects, carefully brushing at its surface with a finger as he traced some of the etchings on its surface. He seemed so focused that I almost decided against trying to get his attention, but he seemed to snap out of it when he saw me. "Oh, Garret, my apologies. I was distracted." "It's fine, no worries." What is that?" I nodded at the rock. "Ah, fascinating, isn't it? I don't recognize the symbols or script. It's possible it's an entirely new culture." I gave him an odd look. His excitement almost mirrored Stefan's when he was talking about aliens or whatever. Almost. "See here?" He beckoned me closer, suddenly giddy in a way that I couldn't have imagined him being. "The script is like nothing that I've ever seen. The symbols all seem to have common motifs. Worshipping, celebrating, placing of gifts." "Worshipping who?" "I don't know, but each sculpture seems to focus on a different figure. In fact, each stone seems subtly different from each other, yet similar within itself." "Meaning?" "That each stone was likely carved and decorated by different people. It could be that they were individual offerings." "But you said that they were all worshipping different things, right?" "Maybe different interpretations of the same god, or perhaps a pantheon. What I wouldn't give for Hagen's notes." A loud throat clearing snapped him out of his excitement. Rufus was glaring at us from across the room, tapping a finger against his folded arms. "Perhaps later." He gave a dainty cough, straightening his jacket, and, I noticed, tried to conceal a shiver before walking back towards Rufus. "Too convenient." "Excuse me?" You found a map that just so happened to lead us directly to the Aran. Now that you're here, you find this weird shit? He gestured at the stone objects around us. And you're like a kid in a candy store. I'm an anthropologist. You cannot hold it against me to be interested in a find like this. And I found the chart of the alternate course at the university Hagen was conducting research for. It is as if I found it in a cave. And after following for a couple of days, bam, we run right into her. Did you know where to find the Aran all along? Are you accusing me of withholding information that could have saved the lives of people on the ship? I reckon that there's just too many coincidences stacking up. Sharif bristled, unfolding his arms, his fists clenched by his sides, and I took an involuntary backward step, eyes darting back and forth between them. Then stop cowering behind insinuation and state what you believe. I am very much done listening to snide accusations. If you believe that I have done something wrong, say it. His voice was low, hissing, his eyes burning into Rufus. For his part, the deer simply met his gaze, but didn't unfold his arms. He seemed to consider his words for a moment. And then without a word, Rufus huffed, turning slowly as he unfolded his arms and sauntered out of the room. Immediately, a wave of relief washed over me. I glanced nervously at Sharif, expecting him to demand an answer or offer a snide parting shot. But to my surprise, he simply glared. After Rufus was gone, he turned sharply and stormed out of the other door leading to the opposite side of the ship. On the other hand, I was relieved that they'd not come to blows, but on the other, my heart sank at the realization that what little cooperation that we had was looking shakier by the minute. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye, a piece of paper sitting on a nearby table, separate from the other pieces scattered haphazardly about. It was handwritten in a vaguely legible scrawl. Blair, could you tell Hagen to stop coming down to the engineering decks without a reason? We kept finding him lurking in the alleyways in the inner hall, scaring the shit out of the repair crews. He also hangs around like a weirdo, watching us work on the props and turbines and muttering to himself while giving us the creepiest look that you can imagine. I'd asked the captain, but word is that he's locked himself up in his cabin using Dixon as his personal goon and errand girl. Out of professional courtesy, and because I don't want blood on my hands, I'm giving you a chance to talk sense into him before I involve her. Cooper. Hagen, Sharif's friend and mentor, also the leader of the expedition as I understood. Apparently he was a bit of an oddball. I pocketed the note. I wasn't really sure why. Maybe I could show it to Sharif, see what he thought of it. In any case, I wasn't up for spending a moment longer in this creepy place. I turned and left through the same door Rufus had stormed out of. Lost for purpose, I wandered through the frosted hallways, shining my torch on signs, notices, doors. I no longer knew what I was looking for, something to take me home from this nightmare perhaps. Voices up ahead shook me from my melancholy, low murmurings echoing from somewhere up ahead. As I got closer, I recognized Sharif and Donna's voice. The surroundings began to look familiar too as I realized where I was. This place. Instantly I felt dread, just like in the laboratory around those weird stones. Last time that we'd been here, I'd been at death's door. Garret? She acknowledged me, arms folded as she stood beside Sharif, who was studying the door. His expression, unlike before, was one of concern. This is where we found you unresponsive. You were fortunate, Garret. Not everyone on the Sylvia can claim the same. It's locked, although I think the big X and warnings on it could have told us that. Warnings? You know what they say? It says, "Do not open," and "death inside," in Norwegian. You understand Norwegian? Naturally, I learned it while studying with Tobias. Who? Professor Tobias Hagen. Apologies, I must have said his first name to you. Whatever. What does it mean by death inside? Presumably hazardous materials, toxic or perhaps radioactive. Are you saying that there's radioactive stuff in here? Immediately I took a step back and Donna flinched and backed away. I said perhaps, but the more likely possibility is that this could be where they stored any deceased crew. Seemed like a pretty intense warning for dead bodies. Even in an environment like this, improperly stored cadavers can be hazardous. In any event, without a key, we can only speculate. We stood in silence for a while. Even being near this thing made me want to run. It has been a while since we last gathered. We should return to the mess hall and plan our next steps. Without waiting for a response, he turned, the sounds of hoofsteps echoing into the distance. By the way, have you seen Stefan? I blinked, a little surprised by her question. Yeah, he was in the cabins. Why? How did he seem to you? Still obsessed with finding Alex. Why? She paused, glancing away as if considering. Nothing. And with that, she turned and followed after Sharif. I watched after her, frustration bubbling at her evasiveness, but then I realized that I was alone in front of the creepy door. I quickly decided to follow her. By the time that we arrived at the mess hall, everyone else was there. People had clustered into groups. Joseph stood off by himself, stoic as usual. June hurried over, causing him to crack the smallest of smiles. Aaron was muttering with Tabby. They both glanced up as we entered for a moment before returning to their conversation. Wait, where's Stefan? Who cares? Aaron! What? I'm sick of his prattling. If he wants to freeze to death looking for a dead man. Gale spluttered before launching into a furious triad. Aaron was completely nonplussed, and Tabby finally had to take Gale by the hand and pull her away, still fuming. Sharif locked eyes with Rufus, and I felt the anger pass between them before Sharif turned on his hoof and addressed the room. If I may have your attention. Slowly, all eyes turned to him. This was not like on the Sylvia, where he had a commanding presence. Mutinous looks burned into him. I thought I saw a brief ripple in the otherwise cold expression. Maybe he sensed the potential situation brewing. We should discuss our next steps. Miss Cavern? He turned to June. Did you find much in the way of supplies? She exchanged a brief glance at Joseph, who, seeming her discomfort, spoke instead. Lots of water, crates of bottles, less fuel, but still enough for a while. As he spoke, he lifted a crate filled with liter bottles of water and dumped it on the counter, followed by another containing canisters of kerosene. I felt my hopes raise a little. He picked up a crate on the floor and placed it heavily on the counter. Inside, a dozen battered cans rattled against each other. We found little food, maybe 2 days at most. The silence that followed was surreal. I could swear that I could hear the gears turning in everyone's heads, the building crescendo that would follow. 2 days? Aaron, enough. But the hair was livid. He didn't even try to contain the rapid tapping of his boot on the floor, with a look of fury that I think even Sharif was surprised by. Fuck you! This is all your fault! All of this! Sharif stood his ground, grimacing. This fucking ship has been missing for 2 years, and now we need to hope that we just happen to be found in 2 fucking days? If we ration, we could last a little bit longer. And then what? Didn't you say that you could fix the radio, Garret? Now everyone's eyes are on me. I look from face to face, a mix of curiosity and hopefulness on each expression. I said that I could try. The radio was pretty smashed up, but if I could get the right tools, I can help. There are plenty of tools. Yeah, think we'll pass on your help, if you don't mind. Joseph snorted, taking a step towards him when June stepped between them, pleading with him to drop it. Then I felt it, the burning in my eyes. I closed it and cursed, reaching for my pocket. I placed a drop, slightly soothing the burning, but the pain continued. Thankfully, it wasn't a thunderclap. Gale seemed to notice me struggling. I tried to give a crooked smile and thumbs up to reassure her. I think we should rest on it first. How the hell are we supposed to sleep in here? It's like a meat locker in here. I am not convinced sleeping is the best option right now. Look, we're all tired, even if some of us aren't willing to admit it. She gave Tabby a pointed look, who tutted and rolled her eyes, but did not argue back. She briefly met my eyes, seemingly asking silently for my permission to use myself as another case in point. I grimaced. I didn't want to be a burden. Plus, Garret nearly died a few hours ago. Good old Donna, always giving a fuck about diplomacy. And we all got woken up by a fire and the Sylvia's sinking. I think that we could all stand a few hours to get some shut-eye. I will stand watch in that case. I will remain on bridge. We'll give good view of any our surroundings. There could be other survivors from Sylvia. An awkward pause followed as we awaited more from him, but Joseph simply stood, staring down Sharif. I can stay up here too. I'm used to... No, you need sleep. He snapped at her, surprising not just the rest of us, but June herself. He paused, then deflated, closing his eyes and rubbing his face. I am sorry, June. I appreciate your offer, but I must insist you rest. You had a bad scare on the Sylvia. Then I'll take second watch. A few exasperated groans went up, typical of Rufus to use this as an opportunity to chest beat. But then I saw his expression. I couldn't place it. He was staring down Joseph, watching him closely. Joseph, for his part, continued to demonstrate his supernatural talent for hiding his true emotions. He met Rufus's gaze evenly, arms by his sides, seemingly unmoved. A tense few moments passed before Sharif, with a heavy sigh, pinched his brow with one hand, while the other clenched and unclenched at his side. Very well. If we are agreed, we can shelter for the remainder of the night. I cringed, as I anticipated another round of insufferable bickering, but this time, amazingly, no one objected. Then I suggest that we sleep here, in the mess hall. The crew already built shelters here, so... But there's only enough for 5 people here. We all looked around at the makeshift shelters. She was right. I'll take a cabin. Not like there's anyone left to object. Me too. Gail glanced at her sister before sighing. Guess I'm for the cabins too. Aaron shrugged, and before anyone else could say anything, he stalked out, slamming the door behind him. A tense silence followed before Sharif cleared his throat. If Joseph is taking first watch and Rufus the second, I shall take third watch. Please remember to wake me when the time comes. He directed this at Rufus, who simply nodded. Very well. I wish you all a good night. His words were so absurd that I almost laughed, but with my eyes still stinging, I wasn't in any mood for levity. Gale gave me a strained look before following Tabby out of the door. I don't know how long each worked on getting our claimed sleeping spots in order. I didn't have my phone and I didn't have a watch. We each started to hunker down. June stood with Joseph near the door, murmuring, holding hands. A piece of me felt a sudden burning jealousy at their intimacy, their bond. Dana and Sharif worked silently, shaking and patting frost off of the thin mattress and taking a small candle heater in place to near them. I was surprised by how much warmth they gave off, but whether it would be enough. The door squeaked and I heard heavy hoof steps departing, followed by June despondently walking to her own shelter. I slipped into the cover, pulling my hood up. I hadn't realized just how cold I was until I felt my ears burning, the heat returning to them, realizing how they'd become numb from the chill. Despite how thin and uncomfortable the mattress was, and how nagging at the back of my mind was the thought that a dead person had slept here, my eyelids were suddenly heavy. The thought of falling asleep and simply passing away never to awaken sent a brief pang of terror through me. Would it hurt? Or would I simply blink out of existence like a bad dream ending? I closed my eyes, trying to pull out of my mind my shivering calm as my body heat was able to win over the merciless chill, helped by the blanket, my clothing, and the small heater. But even just that small amount of warmth was enough to soothe. My breathing slowed. The lead weight of fatigue pushed me quickly into a dreamless slumber. A low roar and the sounds of things banging roused me. As my eyes opened for a moment, I thought that I'd finally lost sight in my good eye. My tongue felt like a sandpaper, and my throat felt like it was closing. My stomach growled, clenching and writhing. How long had it been since my last meal, my last drink? The lantern had gone out at some point in the night. Fumbling around, I gripped my torch with relief and turned it on. Dana's back was still towards me. I could hear her deep, even breathing. She must still be asleep. I sighed, thankful that my eye had stopped hurting. A tiny amount of moonlight seeped in through the windows, coated in frost as they were. Another blizzard, or at least a heavy wind, had started up. The sound of things slamming and creaking were distant but were unsettling nonetheless. My nose was frozen once more and the cold had seeped through my flimsy blanket. I figured that I should find some fuel for the lantern. My very bones ached as I forced myself upright. I slowly pushed myself to my paws, grabbing my empty lantern. My torchlight lit the room. I angled it away from Dana so as not to disturb her. Slowly I made my way to the table where the food was. The lantern there had also gone out during the night, but it had given enough heat to thaw some of the water bottles. Without thinking, I pulled the bottle out of the crate and wrenched the top off, taking deep gulps. The icy cold water robbed me of what little warmth I still had, but damn did it feel good. I nearly choked on the small amounts of slushy ice. Evidently, I hadn't thawed entirely. I could feel it sitting in my stomach, chilling me. Part of me felt a pang of guilt as I lowered the now drained bottle. The crate had a lot of water, but between 10 people, it might not last as long as it first seemed. The food crate had 14 cans, soups, meats, vegetables, and fruit. A decent variety I suppose, but with 14 cans between 10 people, even if we only ate half a can of each, that was 2 days plus less than half a can each for day 3. I scanned the calorie labels on a few of them, not unsustainable under normal circumstances, but these were the precise opposites of normal. In fact, in cold like this, I could only imagine that we burned this much just trying to stay warm. Gail might know more about that. She did suggest rationing. My stomach protested again and tied itself into knots as I saw the thin can of processed meat, real meat. The only people here who would eat it was me, Dana, June, and Stefan. The tin had a ring pull. I could open it, take a bite, just to calm my stomach, make it easier to sleep. No. With gritted teeth, I put it back, a little harder than I should have. I took a few moments to steady myself. Tomorrow, when everyone wakes up, we can ration things. Just a few more hours. I chuckled darkly as my frame again attested. I was no stranger to eating light. My lantern, it needed refill, if only for a source of heat. As I reached for the kerosene, my torch beam swept across the shelves. That was when I noticed. Rufus, Joseph, and Sharif are all missing. June was sleeping soundly at the far end of the room, and Dana hadn't stirred. I thought Rufus was second watch and Sharif was third. So, why are they all missing? Putting my lantern down, I gripped my torch and swept the room, trying my best not to disturb the 2 women sleeping. No sign of them. Were they all on watch? My stomach did another flip, but not from hunger. I'd seen the way that the 3 of them were nearly at each other's throats. Despite the exhaustion and gnawing hunger, I decided that I needed to search. The bridge was where they were supposed to stand watch. I pulled my hood up, cupped my muzzle in a hand, and breathed heavily to try to warm my nose and slipped through the door. It was hard to tell at the time given the near constant darkness, and now more than ever, I wished that I had a watch. My hand grasped the packet of smokes. As I started to pull it out, I remembered my missing lighter. My heart clenched at the thought of it sitting on the bottom of the ocean. I cursed loudly, not caring if anyone heard. I could light up a lantern, I suppose, but the thought of Grandpa's lighter lost forever. Now in an even fouler mood, I shoved my hands back into my pockets and continued my way towards the bridge. It was several flights of stairs above me, and I was not looking forward to walking up icy steps. The stairs further away from the exterior access points were generally less hazardous than the ones closer to the outside, but even a thin layer of frost could make for poor footing. Each step that I took up the narrow passage to the bridge felt heavier and heavier. Despite my thick, warm clothing, every movement that I took felt like I was moving through tar. The unrelenting cold was a constant drain on my energy. Even pausing to catch my breath required effort. The icy chill hurt my throat and lungs. I really needed to stop smoking. Finally, I arrived at the narrow stairs leading to the bridge. I couldn't hear anything except the wind. That reassured me that at least they weren't at each other's throats. My stomach growled loudly again as I pushed through the slightly ajar door. Hey, how's it going? The instant I stepped through the door, the stench of iron filled my nostrils and made me gag. I stared, open-mouthed, at the scene of devastation before me. Streaks of fresh blood stained the floor, the window, even the overturned seat. I tried to call out, but all that I could manage was a choked squeak. My blood felt like it had been replaced with ice. My eyes scanned the dark crimson streaks, my torch beam slowly passing over them. My ears swiveled, trying to tune out the hammering of my heart. I didn't even know what I was listening for. Growls, paw steps, heavy breathing. I backed out, my torch beam swinging wildly back and forth. And that's when I saw it. For the briefest of moments behind a control console, my torch beam passed over and... it could have only been... I let loose a scream of primal terror and turned, almost throwing myself down the steps. I sprinted as fast as my legs would carry me. I didn't even have a destination in mind initially, just away from there. I felt like my heart was going to burst in my chest. Even now, several decks down, I could taste the iron, the sickening, warm stench of blood. I burst into the mess hall, panting. "Everyone, please!" I saw the jerking twitches of June and Dana being jolted awake. June moaned, turned over and away from the light. Dana opened her bleary eyes and met my gaze. I couldn't quite put into words what happened next, except that once she met my gaze, understanding passed between us. Within moments, she was upright, throwing off her covers. "What happened? What's wrong?" "The bridge. Someone... so much blood." I could scarcely speak the words. The burning in my lungs from the near, unbroken sprint from the bridge left me breathless, and the lingering stench in my nose made me want to throw up. Dana dashed over to me as June leisurely stretched and started to pull off her covers. The tigress gripped my shoulders and spoke to me like I was a child. "Garret, what happened?" What's going on? Is it morning?" "Garret, you stink of..." She met my eyes, even as my mouth flapped open trying to describe what I saw. She knew. "Take me there." Her voice was firm and uncompromising. While I might have been resentful in any circumstance, her commanding tone was somewhat reassuring. It cut through the primal terror. "The bridge." I choked out the words as June approached, her expression morphing from quizzical to horrified. "What? About the bridge? Is Joseph okay?" The rising panic in her voice caused Dana to snap, shaking me by the shoulders. "Snap out of it, Garret. Take us there. Do you understand?" I gulped at her, my mind frozen by fear, but I swallowed and gestured to the door. It was... the blood. "Garret!" She shouted in my face, gripping my facial fur and forcing me to meet her piercing gaze. "Get a grip. Take us there. Right fucking now." She shoved me to the door. June glanced between us with dawning horror. I pushed the doors open and, with the heart beating wildly with fear, I led them back to that horror. As soon as I ascended the stairs, Dana and June, close behind, the stench of blood overwhelmed me again. My empty stomach lurched, nearly making me throw up. If I'd actually had that can of meat, I'd almost certainly would have. "Oh my God. Joseph?" Even Dana, who I'd assumed would be used to blood, was appalled, surveying the scene in open-mouthed shock. "Joseph? Joseph?" June dashed into the midst of the carnage, frantically searching for signs of him. It could be Rufus or Sharif. They weren't in their beds. "Joseph! Sharif! Rufus! Can you hear us? Make a noise if you can hear us." The pair began to search, June frantically while Dana was more methodical, around the various stations looking under them and wherever there might be room for someone to lie injured. My own torch beam scanned the bloodstains on the floor, following it off towards... Dana. The door. She turned to look at me before following my gaze and my torch to the bridge wing door overlooking the starboard side of the ship. Wordlessly, we all ran to the door. It was being held shut by the fierce wind outside, but it had clearly been opened. Outside, the narrow walkway was covered in snow. but it had been disturbed. Blood streaked a path through it towards the edge, where the blood had splattered against the side. Oh God, do you think... Joseph! We all ran to the edge, peering over the railing and shining our torches down. The wing jutted out just enough that if someone had fallen or been thrown from here, they'd likely miss the iron deck entirely and plunge down into the snow that entombed her. The flurries and darkness prevented our torch beams from reaching more than a few feet. Even if they had landed on the deck, they couldn't see properly from here. Garret! I felt a firm hand on my shoulder, and she spun me around, bringing her face close to mine. Get the others in the cabins. Wake them up and bring them to the mess hall. But I couldn't hide the terror on my face, and Dana, despite her commanding tone, had fear etched in her expression. I gulped, nodded, then turned and sprinted to the stairway for a second time that night. The cabins looked even more of a mess as I dashed through the corridor, screaming for people to wake up. I hammered on doors, pushing them open, yelling. Stefan responded first. He'd apparently claimed a cabin for himself and appeared at the door, his alarmed expression not hiding the exhausted bags under his eyes. Then Gail and Tabby, the latter angrily demanding to know what was going on, and finally Aaron. I ignored their protests and simply told them that we had to get back to the mess hall. Surprisingly, they didn't argue. I didn't know if they saw my fear or perhaps thought that we were being rescued. I didn't care. The sooner we were back in the shelter of the mess hall, the better. When we got back, the lanterns had already been relit. 2 people were waiting for us, but they weren't Dana or June. The hell have you guys been? I was starting to think that the rescue had come and nobody thought to tell us. And what was the ruckus about? I heard Garret screaming from the hallway across the ship. I froze, staring at the pair of them as the others filed past me, still confused. Where the fuck have you 2 been? Rufus bristled and Sharif unfolded his arms, preparing to be insufferable when Dana and June slipped through the door. Whatever anger the 2 had felt faded quickly into concern when they saw them. June was completely falling apart, tears streaming down her face, clinging to Dana. Gail dashed over and took her from Dana, holding her until that she could guide her to a nearby bench to sit. June made no attempt to resist, sobbing softly. When she looked up and saw Rufus and Sharif, whatever hope she might have had that the blood belonged to one of them was torn from her, and she gave a wail of despair. Would someone please tell me what the fuck is happening? Joseph, he's... Oh God! Joseph is missing, and the bridge. It's a bloodbath. Shock went through the room. Only June's sobs and the storm outside made any noise. Bloodbath? What are y'all talking about? Wait just a second. Where have you 2 been? All eyes turned to Rufus and Sharif, only this time their expressions were decidedly more fearful. Me? I got hungry and tried looking for more food. We'll all been starving soon, with just the little box over there. I was in the laboratory. I was studying those carvings that I found last night, before we turned in for the night. Can anyone else vouch for you? More silence. The pair of them glanced around at the accusing glares. Now wait just a minute. You cannot be seriously accusing me of harming Joseph. The 3 of you have been at each other's throats since we started this fucking trip. Just as everyone started speaking up, Dana barked. Shut the fuck up! She snarled, baring a tooth before calming. Aaron took a nervous step back. Before anyone starts pointing fingers, I want to remind everyone that the only person here who, as far as we know, does not have a motive against Joseph is June. So I think we should all start by establishing who has an alibi. It would seem that unless Rufus and Sharif have anything else to add, they do not. Now wait just a goddamn... Well? They gave her mutinous glares, but said nothing. I think it's safe to discount June for the time being. Garret, who was in the room when you first woke up? Just you and June. And Tabby and Gail, did either of you leave your cabins during the night? No, I don't think so. No. She was firm, meeting Dana's gaze evenly. I didn't sleep at all. Gail didn't leave at all in the night, and neither did I. and no. Obviously, it means Gale can't vouch for me, so add me to your pinboard of suspects. Fair enough. Aaron and Stefan? Who? Me? Stefan had been unusually quiet this whole time. In fact, I remembered he hadn't been at last night's meeting either. I was searching most of the night. I don't remember exactly when, but I crashed in one of the cabins when I found a working heater. I just went straight to sleep. I was knackered from last night, so I never woke up until I heard Garret screaming. Wait. Are we seriously suggesting that someone here is a killer? Tabby. Instead of the usual sharp rebuke, she sounded more pleading. Fearful glances cast about as we all started to realize the ramifications. Not necessarily. What does that even mean? The bridge is saturated with blood. Whatever happened, it was incredibly violent, and we found evidence that the victim was either dragged or moved himself to the bridge wing and fell. So first question, who here is wearing different clothing? We all scanned each other. Everyone seemed to be wearing the same stuff that they'd been wearing the night before. It's difficult to believe whoever attacked him managed it without getting any blood on themselves, especially if they had been dragging Joseph to the bridge wing and threw him over. If he was attacked by one of us, the killer would have worn something disposable. The ship has no shortage of spare clothing. Even so, it would be incredibly difficult to avoid getting any specks of blood on them. So, we should check ourselves for signs of blood? Specifically, I will. Now wait a minute, who put you in charge? I'm a cop, and I have more of an alibi than the two of you, but since the only person who can be reasonably sure couldn't have killed him is in no position, then perhaps... Gale? Gale looked up from her, hugging June, fright in her eyes. Me? And Garret. For some reason, this upset them more than suggesting Gale. Why him? Why are you so trusting of him all of a sudden? Because Garret found the crime scene and came here to tell me and June. He also has the most sensitive nose here, so if anyone has blood scent on them... Wait a second. I've been in the breach twice now, so you, me, and June at least will stink of blood. I understand that, but we have to make do with what we have. You weren't touching me. He glared daggers at me. What the fuck was his problem? Did he think that I wanted to do this? Dana, maybe I shouldn't. I'm sorry. Are you saying that you refuse to prove that you don't have any blood on you? I don't have to prove jack shit to you. As I recall, you chose to go to the cabin by yourself? What is that? So, you not only have no one to give you an alibi, you were uniquely situated to slip away unnoticed, yes? Fuck you. You can't. Aaron, if you like, I can check you. I won't touch you at all, okay? Let's, just get this over with. Who gave you the right to demand that we prove ourselves? Are you saying that you don't care if one of us is a killer? Of course that's not what I'm saying. Look, check me first, Garret. I got nothing to hide, and the sooner that we can all be sure, the sooner that we'll be able to relax. She stepped forward, stretching her arms out by her sides like someone preparing to be frisked. With all eyes on me, I nervously began to scan her clothing. Start with the hands and wrists and work down. Aaron, shall we? No, I'm next. Get this bullshit out of the way. Using my beam, I scanned as closely as I could for signs of blood. I was careful not to touch her. Last thing that I needed was for this to get confrontational. The entire time I sniffed as subtly as I could. The scent of blood was faint, but it wasn't coming from her. My stomach lurched as I realized that it was coming from me. Regardless, I couldn't see a drop of blood. When I straightened up and gave her a smile and nod, I couldn't tell which one of us was more relieved. One by one, each of us submitted to a search. Dana did Rufus, then Sharif, who insisted that he should be next after Rufus. I searched Gale once she was done with Aaron, then Stefan. Finally, there was just me and Dana. Dana went first, Gale searching her methodically. My heart began to race. I knew that I was innocent, but what if a speck got on me when I searched the bridge? Finally, Gale approached me. She gave me a haunted look. Clearly, she was as scared as I was, before I assumed the same pose everyone else had. She scanned my wrists. I clenched my teeth, aware everyone was watching. Then she moved behind me, scanning my back before moving in front of me. I tried to avoid her gaze, fixing my gaze at a spot on the floor. As she moved down my legs, my fear grew. I'd walked on the bloody floor. What if? My mouth was dry and I determinedly refused to meet the eyes of the suspicious glares that I was getting. Dana's sort of vouching for me had clearly not sat well with everyone else. Given her lack of tact, it could simply be that she didn't think of it, or didn't care, or maybe. She stood, sighing and giving me a reassuring look. Clean. I returned a small smile, trying not to sigh in relief. So, we're all clean? What does that mean? Well, it's not impossible that it's unlikely any of us are responsible, but that leaves a question as to what happened to Joseph. Polar bears? Do they live around here? Wherever here is, I guess. Can I? June finally spoke up. Her voice was soft. It was barely as a whisper. I want to look for him. June, my dear, if what Dana has described is true, then I have to find him. She was louder now, rising to her feet with a furious gleam in her eyes. All this talk. You don't know if he's dead. You didn't find his body. You didn't even try to look. June. No, none of you actually give a shit. You're all just trying to clear your own guilt. I'm going to find him. June. If he wasn't attacked by one of us, then whatever it was is still out there. Then help me. In a flash, her anger morphed to desperate pleading. She turned to Gale, gripping her shoulders and begging. Please, someone. Just help me look, please. An uncomfortable silence fell as she looked at us in turn, in entreaty, tears silently pouring down her cheeks. I'll help you. He stepped over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. We'll find him, so keep your chin up, okay? This was a very different Stefan from the previous night, searching for his brother. If he was acting, he was good at it. For the first time since our grisly discovery, I thought I saw her smile slightly. Damn, Stefan really knew how to step up. All right, I guess we can form a search party. Are you insane? After everything we just... Aaron looked to June. She gazed imploringly back, begging silently. Aaron melted, shame creeping across his face as he turned his gaze from her. If we're going to search, I suggest that we continue our efforts to summon rescue. Garret, would you be willing to try to repair the radio? You want me to go back into the bridge? Alone? Someone can accompany you, but without the radio, we are short on options. Sure, I can give it a go. I can't make any promises, mind. We can't ask anything more. And what about the engine room? Tabby, would you be willing? No, it is too dark down there. If the lanterns go out... Gale. Her sharp rebuke took even Gale by surprise. They really were sisters. I'll try. But I want at least 2 people with me, and all the lights that we can get. I'm going with you. Gale was firm, already picking up a lantern. I guess I can keep y'all company. I got a flashlight here. This left Sharif, Dana, and Aaron for who would accompany me. For a moment it seemed that Dana was going to speak, when... I'll go with him. Now that was surprising. I gave him a quizzical look. In fact, I think everyone did. Look, I'm starving here, so the least that I have to move around the better, okay? Plus, it's a choice of roaming the ship with whatever is out there, or hanging out with you. Stop. You're making me blush. He gave me a foul look and Dana stepped between us. Are you sure? Maybe I should... I'm sure. Go find Joseph. Somehow, going with Aaron filled me with almost as much dread as going by myself. We sorted into our groups, Aaron and I grabbing a couple of batteries for our torches, while everyone else started gathering lanterns and fuel. Good luck. I offered to them, and got a few smiles and you-twos back, but the fear and shock was palpable. In a way, I was grateful that I wouldn't need to be the one to make the discovery of Joseph's fate. On our way, we paused before our storeroom. If I was going to make any attempt at repairs, I needed tools. Rooting around, I found a butane soldering iron, and a toolbox with assorted useful stuff, screwdrivers, pliers, tape, a couple of hammers, a hacksaw. Without even realizing that I was doing it, I hefted some of the tools for my weight for its potential to stab, cut, or bash. I felt a pair of eyes burning into the back of my head and quickly dumped them back into the toolbox. As much as I might have felt safer with a weapon, Aaron seemed wary enough of me as it was. The moment I stepped into that awful scene, my nose twitched. The wing door was still open, the blizzard outside already causing a thin coating of frost on everything. It took everything that I had not to gag. Time had given the blood time to permeate the air, and the overwhelming stench of iron made my stomach heave. Aaron seemed less overwhelmed, and I was briefly jealous of his less sensitive sense of smell. Aaron looked around in horror and paused by the door. "Oh, fuck me. What the fuck?" We both stood, surveying the devastation for a moment before Aaron pointed me towards the radio room. Let's just get this done, okay?" I nodded. Once I was in the radio room, I hefted the toolbox and placed it on the desk by the radio equipment. The radio had been intentionally smashed with a bladed tool, but it was still largely intact inside. As far as I could tell, maybe whoever did it was too much in a hurry or wasn't an expert. Regardless, I put it from my mind. I used a screwdriver to open up the main VHF unit. As soon as I did, a spaghetti of wires and cables spilled out, connecting circuit boards. God damn. What's up? The insides are more complex than I thought. Fixable? If I have power. Aaron perused the toolkit and then wandered off, checking the bridge consoles and stations for something. Where are you going? I tried to keep the minor panic from my voice. As much as I wasn't too fond of Aaron right now, given his finger pointing, I absolutely did not want to be alone. Now I can hear myself think. As I shuffled about, I went back to the radio, though my ears were scanning hard for any stray noises. I put the torch in my mouth as I pulled a screwdriver from the box. Working away, I pulled out wires and took mental notes of the parts that had survived being obliterated. The more I examined it, the more my hope built. Whoever had attacked the radio hadn't done a very good job. While I could see the damage had been enough to render it inoperable, it was definitely fixable, provided I had the right parts. The main concern was power, though. A radio like this wouldn't work with standard disposable batteries. Here. Aaron's hands presented a bunch of assorted batteries in a variety of sizes. These work? Afraid not. We need something bigger. How big? 12 volt. Something like a car battery. Mixing a bunch of disposables won't give us the power that we need. That lot was all I could find, I'm afraid. I rolled the batteries in my hands. They weren't in great condition, and the prolonged sub-zero temperatures might have drastically reduced whatever charge they still had. I doubt even if I could somehow join them in a circuit that I'd get enough power to turn the radio on, let alone get a message out. I'd need a large battery. But I figured that I'd cross that bridge when I come to it. I'll see what I can do, thanks. I continued to work. The soldering iron worked miraculously, and soon I was connecting the severed sections back together with reconnected wires. Not pretty, and certainly not safe, particularly in an environment like this. But as long as we could get a distress call out, I'm sure that we could all live with it. So, who do you reckon did it? His question snapped me out of my focus, but it was his tone that took me by surprise. Accusing. I looked up from the radio and met his eyes. The look he was giving me told me everything. His arms were folded, leaning in an apparent nonchalant manner against the wall, his eyes burning into me, no warmth. Why? You must have a theory. No, I don't. And I don't care right now. I'm trying to fix this fucking thing. I huffed and turned back, not wanting to rise to his bait. Liar. A mix of fury and indignation boiled inside, but I forced myself to keep it contained. I snubbed him, turning back and forcing myself to concentrate on the radio, even though my hands were shaking with a mix of the cold and anger. Just saying. If something happened to me, you'd be the only suspect. That's when I heard it. The quaver in his voice. Are you scared of me? He twitched, his face briefly a picture of shock before it twisted into a snarl. He balled his fists and took a step towards me. I'm not scared of... What? Now I was stood to, towering over him. A scrawny little mummy's boy mutt? For a moment, I simply stared, blinking at him as I processed what he'd said. Then I smirked. The fuck are you grinning at? I couldn't help it. It was such an absurd situation. The ball of anxiety in my chest was so heavy that I couldn't even begin to take him seriously. Is that the best you've got? He stood, staring me down with a mutinous glare. If I hadn't seen him nearly shit himself at least twice now because of my temper, I'd been convinced that he was about to punch me. As much as I wanted to give him a taste of his medicine, the familiar fear scented permeating the room told me everything that I needed to know. Aaron, I'm scared too, mate. If you told me that you weren't scared, I'd call you a liar. Don't. Just don't. Don't psychoanalyze me. I'd rather you snarl like a fucking savage, to be honest. I cringed. The memory of how I'd scared him back in Slamford hit me with a wave of guilt. Look, mate. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for snarling at you. I just sometimes... I spread my hands helplessly, not sure what to say. Some of us don't have the luxury of claws or fangs. You meant like Joseph? A pang of irritation shot through me. He didn't have fangs or claws, but he was built like a fucking tank. But that didn't save him, did it? Aaron finally looked away, biting his lip. He rubbed his arm, shrinking a little. I guess I'd gotten through. Aaron. Joseph was... He could have gone against Rufus and Juan. Probably. I gestured to the carnage around us. And yet his body is gone, and his blood is all over the fucking room. You don't know it's his blood? So, where is he? I don't fucking know. We both stood in silence. I think even Aaron was surprised by his outburst. After an intermittent pause, we both moved away, me back to the radio, Aaron slowly leaning over a nearby station, head bowed and ears limp. In, count to 3. Closing my eyes, I did my breathing exercises before getting back to work. I don't know how long I worked, neither of us speaking. I don't think Aaron moved from his spot the entire time. Eventually I stood, knees cracking, and I stretched. It wasn't pretty. It would definitely have gotten me fired from my electrician job with good reason, but as long as we could broadcast and receive, we should be good. All we needed was power. Hopefully Tabby would do something in the engine room, although I wasn't optimistic. For all we resented Joseph for the state of the Sylvia, we really could have used him right now. Do you think she's still here? I blinked. I'd almost forgotten that he was here. Who? I turned, anxiously anticipating another argument, but... Tears poured silently down his face. He was hunched over at the station, eyes fixed on a collection of what looked like charts. I was speechless. I'd never known how to comfort people, to tell them what they needed to hear. I'd always thought that I'd come across as insincere, but... He screwed his eyes tightly shut and let out a soft whine. You mean... Carrie? He nodded, burying his face in his hands. I mean... Fuck, what could I even say? She could still be here. I mean, we haven't found, anyone yet. He didn't respond, simply resting his face in his hands. He sobbed noiselessly, his shoulders shaking. Whatever lingering resentment that I had melted away. It was easy for me to forget that, unlike me, he'd been here of his own volition, a desire to clear his sister's name and even possibly to find her, for better or worse. I couldn't stand the idea of people hating her, blaming her. His voice shook. I took a few tentative steps towards him before slowly, gently placing a hand on his back. I tried a few times to say something, but each time my words just rang hollow in my head, so I stayed silent. I miss her so much. I was about to speak when I heard, or rather felt, a noise. It drifted across the room like a breeze and chilled me as much as any blizzard. My body tensed. A shiver went down my spine as I realized someone or something was behind us, near the doorway. Moments passed as my mind raced. I Needed to turn. I had to warn Aaron. I had to run. Whatever had gotten Joseph, it was back. A harsh, rasping noise followed by the sound of ice crunching finally pushed me over the edge. I spun round, yelling and waving my torch. Garret, what is it? I finally contained my flailing enough to affix my torch beam on the entrance leading back to the stairwell and, just for a moment... Hey, I'm talking to you! He gripped my shoulder and pulled me around, his face still wet with tears, but now his eyes shone with fright. Didn't you hear that? Hear what? I pulled away sharply, shining my torch at the doorway, the beam shaking wildly in my trembling hand. I saw it. I know I did. Garret, you're scaring the ever-loving fuck out of me right now. What did you see? This time he shone his torch beam around, circling the doorway as though checking that there wasn't something that had snuck in. I know I heard it. If I hadn't been petrified, I'd been burning with shame, but my instincts were on high alert. Every howl of wind, every creak of exhausted steel, my ears picked it all up. Fuck only knows that Aaron's radar, like ears, was detecting at this point. But then it hit me. If Aaron wasn't detecting any noise, maybe... Okay, let's, both take a look, yeah? This time, he seemed to be the brave one. He gave my shoulder a squeeze and pointed, directing me to move across the door. My heart felt like a fucking jackhammer. Slowly, we both approached the doorway, aiming our torches. I wished that I'd held onto that screwdriver, as pathetic as it would have been against whatever had gotten Joseph. With a nod, we both darted in front of the door, shining our combined light beams through the entryway where I'd seen that awful thing. And nothing. I could see the narrow passage leading down and not a single sign of anyone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Slowly, we looked at each other. Aaron's face was a picture of terror, and I can only imagine what mine was like. Then Aaron snorted. I did so too, and within moments we were both giggling before breaking into full-blown laughter. You massive fucking cunt. You had me. I was sure. It felt like an evil spirit flowed out of me. I was still scared, sure, but the intense, imminent death feeling evaporated, leaving me and Aaron giggling like a couple of crazy people in a blood-soaked room. Fuck, man, I'm sorry. I could have sworn. Listen, why don't we rely on your nose and my ears, yeah? He gave me a little smirk, and while I caught his smugness, I didn't really care. Really, would I have preferred to have confronted whatever I thought that I'd seen? Did you fix it? What? The radio. Did you fix it? I. So we can call for help? Well, if we can get power, like I said we need. Who was that? It was a female voice. It was distant and distorted through the sounds of this dead hulk that I couldn't identify who, though. They might be in trouble. What do we do? We should go check up on them. But what about the radio? It can wait. It's not going anywhere, and Dana and the others could be in trouble. You're awfully brave all of a sudden. Are you saying that you'd be happy if we all ignored you, if you called out? No. Then follow me. I was not brave, of course. My stomach twisted in hunger and terror. This time, I grabbed a screwdriver. Aaron decided that I'd had a good idea and grabbed a hammer. We made for the door and the oppressive blackness of the ship's interior. To be continued. Ooh. So... I guess you could say... whatever bad thing happened... or was going to happen... it's happening. We can only assume, considering that Joseph is missing, that he is indeed the victim. I don't really remember the premise of this story because I thought that... I had a weird sneaking suspicion that you could pick like a person to sort of help with the story. But I guess not. So... I guess... this is what happens when you decide not to turn around, but I kind of also feel that regardless if you had decided to turn around, that this was always meant to happen. But I'm guessing that this is more like the direct route, that you arrived at a certain point, so certain things will happen, as opposed to if you decided, no, we're gonna turn around, and then the ship decides to turn around, but it capsizes and you end up finding other stuff, maybe. But yeah. So this is probably gonna be 2 videos, so I'm gonna stick to what just happened with Aaron and Garret and finding, or rather not finding, Joseph. So I am of the mind to think that something happened to him, someone attacked him, considering the fact that there was a light right there with the axe. I don't know if it's maybe one of the survivors. Maybe they decided to cannibalize people, that they kind of went crazy from hunger maybe, and that's why we don't find any bodies, because the bodies are stored away somewhere else where they were being gradually eaten. I am of the mind to think that perhaps that is the person who attacked Joseph. They found him alone and they attacked him. Maybe he got away. Maybe he made it out of the room and ended up falling into the snow below. And technically speaking, it is possible to stop a person bleeding out by using snow, because it sort of helps the coagulation process. It acts sort of like those patches that you use, or that EMTs use. And don't quote me on this, okay? But that they use in order to stop the bleeding, because it kind of like it sort of packs the area. But I don't know. Maybe he did survive, maybe he didn't. I don't think that it's any of these guys. Although I do feel suspicious about Stefan, the guy that you see right here, the possum. He acts a little too weird for my liking. Like, at first he was kind of annoying and he kind of got on my nerves, but now he's acting a little weird. I don't think that he's a killer though, but I do think that I should keep my eye on him. Because it is very curious that he is on the cover and not Garret, unless it was always intended for Stefan to be the main protagonist and Garret to be like just one of the other characters that's like, ooh, he looks spooky because he has a glazed eye. To be honest, I don't know what to think. It's possible that now that Garret and Aaron have left, that whoever it was that was spying on them earlier, if there even was somebody spying on them, is going to end up destroying the radio completely now. It would be... I don't know, to be honest. I don't even know if there was anybody there, but maybe there is. Maybe whatever it is that they were studying on the ship, regarding the rocks, is causing all of this. Maybe it's a mass hysteria type of thing, like it, happened in Echo, where everyone went crazy after getting moored and people just started attacking each other. I also would like to know what it said on the door, because I tried to use Google Translate and it wouldn't work. It only translated the bottom part that said open. It didn't translate what was on top or what was on the left side. So if anybody that can speak Norwegian happens to be right now watching this, could you translate it for me? If you haven't already. But yeah, so anyways, write down in the comments what you think, and thank you all for watching / listening. If you would like to play Polar Night or stay up to date with it or whatever, you can do so by going down into the link in the description, which will have a direct link for the HIO page. I don't remember if they have any form of support. I think they have a Patreon. If so, I will be posting that down in the description as well if you want to support the project. And yeah, it's been a while since they released this update, but it's because the writer, I believe, the main developer, I guess you could call them, got sick. I believe they ended up getting pneumonia and they ended up getting hospitalized, I think. So they do have a reason for not having updated this in a while. So yeah, thankfully they are better now. So yay, more Polar Night. Anyway, so again, all pertinent links down in the description, and I guess that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.